Welcome into the Illinicast podcast as part of the Big Banter podcast network. And we had the huge, long Big Banter podcast that was previewing the entire Big Ten with all the Big Ten Big Banter podcast network podcasts, which was an absolute blast to be a part of. And I'll tell you what, I am a little ticked off at our Big Banter brethren who don't necessarily believe in the Illini.
I saw what's Eric had us at 6-6. 6-6. This is not your father's Illinois football team. All right. This is I watched that, and Austin, you did a fantastic job. And hopefully you open some eyes, because I don't get it. Like, still, we know what's happening in Champaign, but it seems like the rest of the country is still trying to figure it out.
I mean, I like baseball a lot, so I use like some baseball kind of references here and there. But I feel like Eric was using Tommy DeVito like he was like a 4.5 win player that Illinois was missing out on this year, and it's like he's closer to Luke Altmaier than anything else. I mean, Tommy DeVito's WAR is probably close to like 0.7. Like he's a
Yeah.
great quarterback. He'll get you maybe a win, but I feel like Luke Altmaier can play at that particular level. And surprise, surprise, breaking news, Luke Altmaier was named the starting quarterback for the Illini, Brett Bielema announced. But again, I don't feel like Illinois has all that much to replace. Chase Brown is a great running back, but our offensive line is a top 5 offensive line in the Big Ten. You have Jerzon Newton and Keith Randolph, the law firm at defensive end on the defensive line, and that's first team All-American, second team All-American kind of guys in there, which is something that Illinois has not had since maybe like Simeon Rice or Whitney Merciless. I mean, Jerzon Newton is the first Illini to ever be named to the AP preseason first team, like in Illini history. I mean, that is unreal to have, and for people to just discount that or to poo-poo that idea, like it just blows my mind. And especially being in the Big Ten West, where there's a lot of run down your throat, and you have that defensive line, you have that offensive line, you got the running backs that can take care of the running back by committee that Illinois will have. So I don't feel like Illinois needs to replace all that much. You're keeping the identity. Wisconsin's changing theirs. PJ Fleck has had issues against the Illini. Iowa has an anemic offense that they even have to score so many points, I believe it is, for
25.
Kirk Ferentz. Yeah, for Kirk to even not Kirk, but for his son to even keep his job. So I don't understand why there's so much love for the chaos when in the Big Ten West you win with the steady hand, and that's what Brett Bielema has brought to this Illini team.
Yeah, I mean, there's a Wisconsin love fest going on right now, and I just think it's a little premature. I think Luke Fickell's going to be a great coach, and he's going to be able to work some magic up there in Madison. But the expectations that they have right now for year one, for such a drastic change in system that they're going to have, and they're going to have to tailor their roster around it, I just think it's not going to be as seamless as a lot of pundits want you to believe. Iowa is going to be, I can understand them being a favorite for the West, but what Iowa is known for, the way they beat other Big Ten teams, we out Iowa last year. And so I think we're capable of playing that type of game. And our offensive side of the ball is just a level above. Like, we have a more, hopefully creative play caller, but we have, a quarterback who, kind of circle back the conversation we're having earlier. Tommy DeVito was a good quarterback. Like, he was nice in the sense where he's the best quarterback we've had in a few years, for sure. In the sense he didn't make many mistakes. Like he could run around and get some extra time to make the nice short play. But Luke Altmaier, he expands our game vertically. Like, he can make more deep throws that we never even remotely threatened last year. So I'm looking forward to, his continued development. Once he transferred over here, I caught a couple of his YouTube clips, and I like what he has. And I know he was very close to winning that job last year at Ole Miss. So, because I trust our coaching staff as much as I do think, in a year, 2 years, he's going to be, if not top half, one of the top couple quarterbacks in the conference. And again, for me, I think the pieces are in place. As long as our guys stay healthy, that defensive line, you talked about the law firm. You didn't even mention Gabe Jackus and Seth
Yeah.
Coleman, who on previous teams would be our best defensive player. And right now they're just kind of in the background, waiting for their time to get the shine and some notoriety. We've just we've recruited good talent, and our coaching staff has developed that talent. And for me, I think the window is there. Brett knows the urgency. This is last year divisions. Like, this is our chance to make it down to Indianapolis without having to. We don't have Michigan on our schedule. We don't have Ohio State on our schedule. We have Penn State, but we have them at home. In Drew's first real test on the road. I'm not saying we're going to do it, but the signs are there that we can if I can see the signs, I can tell you Brett can see the signs. So I think there will be a sense of urgency, and I have us winning the Big Ten West, and I'm shocked that I feel so alone in this.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Illinois in preseason rankings from CBS, ESPN, The Athletic range from first all the way down to like fourth or fifth behind like Minnesota and Nebraska, which I can see the top side. I can see that. The people who are saying that Illinois is a bottom feeder in this Big Ten West just don't see it. They only see the heirs of the past in Champaign instead of what Brett Bielema is building now. Um, Again, Luke Altmaier, he's going to be a guy that's going to be a great leader for this offense. I talked to an Ole Miss student who went to school with him, and she was saying how everybody on that campus just loved Luke Altmaier. They loved his leadership, and that Jackson Dart is a good quarterback, but Luke was more of the heart and soul of the campus and of that team. So with that being the case, like I just don't see Luke having that much of an issue translating that into wins in Champaign.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, I think it was their bowl game, or maybe just their last game of the season, where he had already made his intentions on leaving the program. But Jackson Dart
Yeah,
got hurt midway through the game, and no one could blame Luke if he just like, look, I'm not going to risk getting hurt. I'm going to play for a different school. Like, this is going to ruin my chances to find a different football team to play for. No, he just went right in there, and he played his butt off. He had a pretty decent game himself, and that kind of made me excited about his potential. He's not going to be Tommy DeVito when it comes to the vocal aspect. Tommy was born to talk, and he has that, you know, um, Jersey Shore type of persona or whatnot. But
right.
from what I saw of his actions last year, and what you're kind of confirming with the person who went to school with him, he has a different style of leadership where the team like can't wait to march behind him as he leads them onto the field. And I'm really excited to finally have a young quarterback that not only has talent, but he's got years to develop in our system.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the transfer quarterbacks that have came in to this Big Ten West, like Cade McNamara, and I feel like Hudson Card and Luke Altmaier are all in the same kind of tier. Guys that have not really proven it, but guys who are on the precipice, and it's all about who's going to reach and make their ambitions reality. And I think Luke Altmaier has that personality to make that happen, even more than the other two, especially with the talent around Luke compared to Cade and Hudson.
Yeah, and I also think a lot of reasons, other people think that the departing talent is a bigger deal than it really is they see Chase Brown leaving. And every week last year there were, Chase Brown this, Chase Brown that. He was obviously a huge focus of our offense. But this is a Brett Bielema team. You and I know as well as anyone, like, our running back room is loaded. I'm waiting to see which one of the young guys, unfortunately we found out today, redshirt freshman Jordan Anderson is going to be gone for the year, which is a bummer because I really liked his size and speed and what he was going to be bringing onto the field. But we have right behind him true freshman Caden Fegan, 4-star. And Brett's been talking about him all fall camp long. So I think in some ways, and I don't know if you agree with me, but we were so reliant on Chase Brown that I'm actually looking forward to Barry Lunny Jr. having to, use his mind and try to come up with a more diverse game plan because we have talent on offense finally. We have three,
Hmm.
four solid wide receivers. We have a good running back room. Our offensive line, as you mentioned, is in the top handful in the conference. Last year, we're so focused on giving it to Brown. We're one of the worst red zone teams because it seems like we only had one go-to move: just hand it to Chase and hope he scores. He's not really a chain mover like that. So yeah, I get that we lost one of the best running backs in college football, but I think there's also potential that that loss can ultimately be better off for the program moving forward.
And I mean, with Brett Bielema and his past at Wisconsin, it's always been like, oh, what happens when Monty Ball leaves? What happens when this guy leaves? He just makes a new star. He makes a new star running back. I mean, that's kind of his MO. Like it doesn't matter who's back there, he's going to find a way to make them a priority in terms of maybe at least getting drafted at least. So that's why I'm not as concerned about Chase Brown leaving. Yes, Chase Brown is a talented running back. I'm seeing in a preseason with Cincinnati, but Brett can replace him in a way that's not going to hurt, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we may take a minor step back. We may not have a Chase Brown right now as he was as a senior in our young running backs room now, but I don't think that step is nearly as back as other people are making it out to be. And as I said earlier, I think it's going to force our offensive coordinator to come up and devise game plans that's going to better utilize more of the offensive talent that we have on our team. And I'm actually really looking forward to watching that this season.
Yeah, I mean, Isaiah Williams, he can play in the backfield a little bit. He's great in the screen game. And I think with Luke Altmaier, you may see some verticality with Isaiah Williams for the first time, which would be absolutely unreal to see. So, I mean, I just think that this team right here is being so overlooked in a way that will actually help Illinois because I feel like Brett Bielema loves playing with a chip on his shoulder, and I feel like that mindset is going to help his team so much and to avoid those kind of upsets that might happen with a team that is starting to feel themselves against a team like Toledo. So I actually kind of like that there's a little bit of a chip on their shoulder going into the season because I think that's just going to be added benefit for Illini fans.
I mean, you can say, obviously last year's start and then finish. I think we finished like 1-4 or 1-5 or something like that. It was heartbreaking to watch as on a week by week basis. But I think that could have been a huge learning and growing experience for the team that we're going to have this year. At 7-1, I think they're ranked like 14 or something like that in the country. The team may not have been ready for that yet. So now this year, they got humbled in the second half of last season. This year they'll know that it's not only a grind in the beginning of the season, but it's on a week to week basis. Don't worry about what your record is, just continue to get better, and hopefully there's a positive to that the ending last year where we just kind of faltered a little bit, and that it's going to provide a growing experience for this team, which is moving forward.
Absolutely. I mean, you're gonna have teams that also have a chip on their shoulder for losing to Illinois, like Wisconsin, like Minnesota, like Nebraska, like Iowa. I mean,
Penn State,
yeah,
like 2, 3 years ago, right?
yeah. I don't know how many players are still left from that 9 overtime classic,
Yeah.
um, but I mean, James Franklin at least will have that in the back of his brain. But I mean, you look at a team like a game like Purdue where there's going to be a lot of motivation on that Illini side with Ryan Walters and recruiting over him, and I think they'll have them prepared for Purdue, unlike any other Purdue game I've seen, because that always seems like a game that Illinois falls so flat in the battle for the cannon. So I think this year with Ryan Walters, I think that's going to be out the window. So I am looking forward to the team's motivations throughout this season, because it is a vastly different approach that a lot of these Illini players have experienced, where they do have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, but yet they can feel themselves a little bit because of how they played against their Big Ten West counterparts.
I just hope they're as fired up as we are. Like, reading all these
Yes.
previews and these projections and whatnot. I mean, if I'm, Newton or Randolph, and I'm, seeing people have us win 6 games, 7 games, like I didn't come back to, I gave up on and millions in the NFL to finish with a 6-win record, a 7-win record. I think they're here to develop and they're here to bring some hardware back down to Champaign.
Yeah, I mean, and we have the ultimate secret weapon in Jim Leonard. Like, I think his game planning week to week is just going to make such an impact where, like, I think this is going to be one of the most well prepared Illini teams we've seen in terms of X's and O's, because he's just not going to let Illinois like be behind a chapter in the book against the offensive coordinator. He's always going to be a step ahead, which is going to be awesome to see.
Yeah, because I mean, he wants a head coaching job somewhere.
Yep.
He wants to get that positive feedback. After every single game, I'm sure he's learning from one of the best in Brett, but Brett's word is going to matter to teams out there. The same way Ryan Walters was getting his interviews, like Brett he's not shy to share credit. So in the post game interviews, I can see him dropping Jim's name, and Jim, of course, he's going to try to do his best because he wants a Power Five gig next year, and and a successful Illinois season where we're not projected to necessarily be as successful as you and I think we're going to be. His
Hmm.
name is going to be a something that's really going to be discussed pretty heavily in a hopefully very positive light if we can make it happen.
What scares you about this Illini team? I know we're very positive about this Illini group. What keeps you up at night in fearing for this Illinois football team?
Well, it starts with the news today, that Matt Bailey's confirmed out against Toledo. And I think a week or two ago, they said that they weren't really planning to have him back until Penn State. I can kind of understand the reasoning, but he, I think, is super important in our secondary. Right now, as much faith as I have in our defensive line, the secondary, outside our, what's his name, Nicholson, we they're young, they're new. So for me, it's having Matt Bailey's presence out there at safety was going to be able to cover up for some mistakes that some of the younger guys might have made. As Toledo, Kansas, Penn State, these aren't, you know, just grinded out teams. These are teams that are going to test those defensive backs. And, again, you and I are super positive. We have them projected to win 9, 10 games, but there is a scenario out there where we start the season 0-3. If our defensive backs just aren't ready, there that can absolutely happen, and that's what probably keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I agree. Like, what keeps me up at night a little bit is just like our linebacker depth, especially with being in the Big Ten West. I feel like that's always a huge concern for any Big Ten West team, is making sure that your front seven are good to go. And the linebacker crew for Illinois just scares me just a touch, and the depth that they have there.
Yeah, it's just nice, if we had to pick an area of importance, at least in today's football game, where you want to be strongest, is closer to the football. So it's
Yeah,
kind of a comforting feeling that our lack of depth in our linebacking area and our just super youth in our secondary, at least hopefully our the line can get to the quarterback very quick so that our weaknesses can't be exposed.
absolutely. Um, what game are you most excited about this year?
Purdue.
Purdue.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's just one of those where I like Ryan Walters, but he's gotten under my skin just enough. And I think just all the storylines that are going to come with it, Kevin Kane or Brett Bielema essentially choosing Aaron Henry over Kevin Kane. So, Kane's going to be ramped up for this matchup. The fact that the campus is so nearby, and Northwestern has always been our rivalry, but they've got other things that they're kind of dealing with right now. So it'll be nice that Purdue's brought in some talent. They've got a quarterback that I so desperately wanted, um, throwing the ball for them. They've hired what's supposed to be a pretty decent offensive coordinator. So I think it's going to be a fun rivalry moving forward. But it's also the game I think, if you had to give me a list of games I want to win the most, I think that's, right up there as number one for me.
Yeah, mine is a tie of oddly Minnesota and Kansas
Mhm.
because keep seeing these coaching tier lists throughout the offseason. Like in tier two is always like PJ Fleck and Lance Leipold. PJ Fleck, Lance Leipold. It's like, yes, what Lance Leipold did last year for Kansas, bringing them to relevancy, is just unbelievable. Great stuff. Congratulations, Lance. But what has Lance done that Brett Bielema hasn't done? And I say the same thing about PJ Fleck in Minnesota. PJ Fleck hasn't gone to a Rose Bowl with that Minnesota Golden Gophers team. He's always kind of went below expectations. He's always been like, all right, I think Minnesota's going to finish second. Like you always see it in those preseason rankings, or first in the Big Ten West. This is the time the Gophers rise up top. They're going to row the boat to Indianapolis. It really hasn't happened to the extent that I think a lot of Minnesota fans would have expected it to. So I just don't see why they're always in a tier above Brett when Brett has gone to the Rose Bowl, when Brett has led a Wisconsin team year after year after year, and what he's done in his first year at Arkansas and what he's doing at Illinois right now. He is the model of consistency, at least in Big Ten play, if you take out his SEC woes. So I think that those two I really want to beat up on to showcase. No, this is Brett's area. Those two guys can take a back seat to what Brett Bielema has brought year after year after year in college football, comparatively to those two.
I get the Lance Leipold love. He was number one for me, who I wanted to hire, and
Yeah,
he's done a great job everywhere he's at, building around his system. And I would accept putting Brett and him at least in the same tier right now. But this PJ Fleck thing, I don't understand. I like, for me, if there's any coach that should, there's no coach that should be more nervous about the new talent that we as in the Big Ten, brought in coaching wise than PJ Fleck, because PJ got a lot of his wins against Frost. He got a lot of his wins against Lovey Smith. Our division, our conference has upgraded in the coaching staffs. PJ Fleck, I would give like a slightly above average grade as a coach. Let's just say B minus, maybe B if
yeah,
I'm feeling nice. But he was also taking advantage of a division that had just awful coaching, awful game planning. And I think now that now that Brett's here, now that Rule's here, now that Fickle is here, those 9 wins that Fleck was getting every single year, Minnesota is going to kind of realize that they're probably going to settle into the 6, 7 game wins a year expectation, just because the easy wins aren't there anymore. But that's kind of where Fleck is. He's not on Brett's level. He's not on, I wouldn't even say he's on Lance's level. He's, I'll put him in like the tier 3. But I think with him, there's just, his outspokenness, his row the boat, all that, get spots on ESPN just because it's fun and whatever. I think that's kind of built his legacy a little higher than it should materialistically be.
yeah. I think those days are going to come to a screeching halt in the next couple of years, especially with Oregon, Washington,
Yeah.
USC, and UCLA coming to the conference. I mean, that's not going to be fun for PJ. Minnesota has decent high school football, but you're not going to beat those kind of teams recruiting in North Dakota and South Dakota and Minnesota. Like I think that's where Illinois, if they take advantage this year, they can almost end the pipeline of Minnesota players from Illinois. So I think this year is so huge for Brett and so huge for Illinois as a whole, just to set up their spot into being that next kind of tier below like USC, Oregon, Ohio State, and Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, I think our arrows pointed up. You know, we're not going to be at the top level in the next couple of years or so, but I'm more confident now as an Illinois football fan as I've been in the entire history of me being an Illinois football fan. And if I was a Minnesota Gophers fan, I think I wouldn't be quite as optimistic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What Big Ten West team scares you the most?
I mean, probably Iowa. Just because they're just the way you have to beat them is like you just want your weight. It's a chess match on who's going to make the mistake. And last year we prevailed, but can we do it again this year? It's going to be tough. Every single I don't see. It's neither game's going to be a blowout. Obviously, their team's going to have a little more pressure. Their offensive coordinator is going to have a little extra pressure trying to get those 25 points a game every year or every week. But Iowa's the one team where if you told me like you have them projected over us at Illinois, I'm not going to put up a big fight because I get it.
Absolutely. I mean, I look at Wisconsin. Like, I know I've said a lot of crap about Wisconsin here in this podcast, but there could be a rope a dope if that Wisconsin offensive coordinator, who is known for the air raid, comes
Mhm.
in. It's like, no, we're just gonna be Wisconsin. We're gonna ground a pound, even though we
Mhm.
have Tanner Mordecai. We're just gonna keep running the ball like we are always have. Then I will be a little bit more nervous about Wisconsin, just because it's like, oh, they didn't in fact change their identity overnight. So
Right. Yeah.
if they bring that ground and pound kind of game to the Big Ten West, like we've seen them in the past with their upgraded talent, then I'll be like, okay, yeah, let's get this going a little bit more. Brett, like, makes me a little nervous, but that's kind of the only caveat that I have of a team that scares me per se.
Yeah, I mean, because they have a very good coach and they have good talent on that team. I just think people are being a little too aggressive and a little too happy in how well everything is going to mesh in year one.
Right.
So, down the road, I think, Wisconsin has set itself up very well. I think they got a great coach, and I can't argue with that. I think Wisconsin's going to be a team that we're going to be battling on a very similar level for the next half decade or so.
Who is your Illini MVP this season when it's all said and done?
So the reason, if my predictions come true, if we win, I have us winning 9 games. If
Hmm.
we win 9 games, I think it's because Luke Altmaier makes a jump that I'm hoping his talent has already shown. Um, I think our floor and ceiling is based on Luke Altmaier. So if we win 9, that means on a week to week basis, he's getting better. Our offense is looking better. It's spreading it around. We've got a good running back attack. He's throwing it to all three wide receivers that we have to Tip Ryman. I think if he causes stresses for some defenses out there, um, that's what's going to lead to our successful season. So, in my make believe world where we win 9 games, I'm going to say the reason we do that is because of Luke Altmaier.
Yeah, mine is an extension of that. I have Isaiah Williams as the team MVP because I feel like Jerzon Newton is going to draw so much double teams from offensive linemen across the conference. But I feel like offensively, if Isaiah Williams can be Isaiah Williams and be that third best receiver in the Big Ten, or the best receiver not playing for Ohio State, essentially, I think that that'll open up things for this Illinois offense. It'll make Luke Altmaier's job a lot easier. So if Isaiah Williams stays healthy and he does what Isaiah Williams does in space, I think it could have a Rondale Moore effect that Purdue had a few years back. I mean, he just blew up in games. He basically said he basically laughed defensive coordinators. So I think that's going to be a huge impact on Illinois' success this year. Is Isaiah Williams just creating in space like he has in the past, and maybe to a different level this year with the better passing of Luke Altmaier.
And how perfect would that be? Isaiah Williams. At one point he was a 5-star. I think ultimately got bumped down to a 4-star, but he had turned down Alabama. I think Ohio State was in that list. A lot of the blue
Texas.
bloods, Texas, yeah, a lot of the blue bloods to come play at Illinois. Things didn't quite work out for him at quarterback, but to be able to transition to wide receiver and still, be as successful as he can, as he's capable of being, and hopefully being the team MVP on his last season for us, and hopefully leading on to a productive NFL career. It would be one of the better storylines that we've had for Illinois football in the last couple decades almost.
All right. Last question for you, Sonny, before we bring on Brant.
Mm-hmm.
Who is your top three in the Big Ten West?
We'll go
In
Illinois.
what order? Yep.
All right, so I got Illinois winning. I got Iowa second, and I think I'm okay with putting Wisconsin third. Again, I know they got the talent, and I know they got the coaching. I just don't think it's going to mesh as well as everyone else thinks in year one. But I think either of those three can win the West. I have us prevailing, but yeah, that's how I have it. What about you, Austin?
I have Illinois finishing first. I have Wisconsin finishing second, and I have Iowa finishing third. Wisconsin, just because there's going to be some more offense than Iowa, so
Mm-hmm.
that's why I have a little bit more faith that they could finish second. But I think this is Illinois' division to lose if they play to the best of their abilities week in and week out. Yes, there'll be some hiccups, like a game against Penn State, where I feel like that'll be some tough competition, and maybe one Big Ten West clunker that'll be there. But I just feel like this team is the best set up to make a run to Indianapolis across the board of the Big Ten West. So, yeah, it runs through Champaign. The West runs through Champaign in its final year.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me who finishes second or third or fourth or fifth or sixth. As long as the orange and blue is finishing first, I think all smiles here on the Illinicast podcast.
And then we'll have a New Year's Six Bowl to be thinking about, which will be fun. But let's move on. We'll have Brant after this break. Thank you, Sonny. And let's get to Brant.
All right.
Welcome back into the Illinicast, part of the Big Banter Podcast Network. And we have Big Banter royalty here. We have the CEO of Big Banter, Brant Henson, joining us. Brant, how's it going?
Going great, Austin. How are you on this fine Monday?
Doing well. I mean, it's the week before, actually, it's game week. So pretty excited, pretty pumped about what Illinois football can do, and just excited to be part of this podcast network full of some great personalities across the board.
Yeah, we've got a fun squad. It's going to be a very, very fun football season. Even more interesting than most football seasons with the whole Big Banter Network. You'll have access to really all of the fan bases within the Big Ten to talk some smack to right at your fingertips. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Brent, what gave you the inspiration for Big Banter? How did this idea come to be?
Well, yeah, the idea came to be I've always been a big sports fan, specifically a Big Ten sports fan. I'm actually an Ohio State fan. For both football and basketball. I graduated from Ohio State in 2022 with a digital marketing degree. I've been working in digital marketing for a little over a year, but my real passion is sports and sports media specifically. So that's kind of where I came up with the idea, just to kind of start something up on the side while I'm working full time, and just kind of see where I can take it. But I'm super excited with everything we've gotten together so far. We've got a really, really fun crew of people, and it's going to be a blast. I'm super excited for this season.
Now, being an Ohio State grad and being part of that Ohio State fan base, is it fun? Like, or is it just constant stress week after week after week because every game truly matters of playoffs or no playoffs. You have the Michigan game. I mean, what's being an Ohio State fan like for us common folk Illini fans?
Yeah, I know it's a little different, I guess, in the levels of expectations. Like Illinois, you guys are happy to get to a bowl game at least the past few years. Like now, you're probably aiming at a Big Ten West title, but definitely a different level of expectations where playoffs are bust. Nobody's happy for not in the playoffs. Nobody's happy for not winning that Big Ten championship year in and year out, like we were for a good chunk of time until the past few years. Um, so yeah, it's I wouldn't even say it's constant stress because, especially under Ryan Day, if we're playing a lesser team, we're more than likely just going to beat the living breaks out of them. It's almost like unwatchable. It's like Ohio State's playing Maryland this week. We're going to win by 30. You flip on the game, you watch the first half, we're up by 25 at halftime, and it's like, okay, I'll flip to a more entertaining game at this point. Like, I've seen the backups play the past 5 games. I've seen all the young guys. Like, I want to watch real football, you know? But it starts to get stressful if we're in close games, which doesn't happen often. I think it'll happen a lot more often this year. We have a tough schedule, a really tough schedule. So actually, really looking forward to the season because I think we're going to have some watchable games.
Yeah, that wasn't relatable at all. That must be nice. But Brent, the question I really want to ask you, and Austin, I don't know if you've been following our Twitter banter back and forth. Football and basketball aside, Brent, how does it feel supporting a school that essentially created spelling and shouting out loud at football games?
That's not at all what we were trying to say. We were trying to say that Ohio State made up chanting. We were just saying Ohio State started the whole like like that's our thing, you know. That I mean, Illinois does it too. Not gonna discredit that. I just think Ohio State's been doing it longer.
It's kind of funny, Austin. Brant made a very innocent tweet in my direction after a Coleman Hawkins tweet. And I made a joke back, but it was followed by like 20, 25, 30 replies where it was basically a piling on of Ohio State fans. And we're just kind of making, ironic tweets about it. So I'm just having fun with Brant right now.
It was funny. It was
Yeah,
a fun exchange.
yeah. I mean, you got to have some fun. I mean, especially at the expense of Ohio State whenever you can. I mean, because again, they're going to blow the brakes off of you on
Once
the
the game
football
starts,
field.
then they're the ones talking. So
Yeah, you got to win in the tailgates. If you're an Ohio State opponent.
mhm.
I feel you there. I mean, not always, not always. And this year is going to be probably the exception where we're going to play some close games. So it should be fun.
What has been the hardest loss of your Ohio State fandom?
There's two that come to that's front of my mind. One is 2015 Michigan State in the shoe. We had back a lot of our guys from that 2014 national championship team. It was the most talented Ohio State team I've seen in my lifetime, and we were playing against Michigan State, it's a good Michigan State team. It's when they have Connor Cook at quarterback and a bunch of talent on both sides of the ball. But we're genuinely like the most talented team I've ever seen. Urban just like doesn't open up the playbook, and I forget what the exact final score was. Michigan State ends up winning on a game-winning field goal. It knocks us out of the playoffs. It's our one loss that whole season, but Michigan State ends up also having one loss and going to the Big Ten championship and sneaking into the playoffs just to
Yeah,
get
I
blocked
remember
by
that.
Alabama. But I really think that team could have ran the table and gone back to back. The talent was insane on both sides. You got Ezekiel Elliott, like Joey Bosa on defense. It was loaded. And then the other one, yeah, Clemson playoffs easily. I mean
Oh yeah.
that one shook me to my core.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, so many things went wrong. There may have been a few questionable calls that I'll never get over, but at the end of the day, we did lose the game. I think we probably would have won if a few calls went our way, but it is what it is.
Yeah, that's. I remember watching that game, and I mean, I had my Big Ten hat on, trying to support the conference, and I forget. My memory's off a little bit. I don't know if I agreed it was a fumble or it wasn't a fumble on that one play by the refs, but it's just like turned the game around, and they ended up, yeah, they won at that point. Yeah, it's. again, I'd love to get to the level of playing those games. For right now, I'm just rooting for the conference partners.
Yeah, I feel you there, but I do think that Illinois is set for a pretty. I mean, I can't say like great season, but I think they have the potential. The potential's all there, and the schedule is. I mean, it's like hard game after hard game, but they're all winnable.
You know, it's funny. I'm looking at all these season previews, and I see people picking Illinois to win 6 games, 7 games, 8 games. I thought I was a crazy person, and then I see Austin submit us winning. Would you have us winning 9 games, 10 games?
10-2.
Love it. That's exactly what I was thinking. Like we had no prior discussion beforehand about what we projected our records to be, but I'm genuinely dumbfounded. I know we're talking about this in the podcast today. We're just talking about how the Big Ten is going to turn out, but the love that Wisconsin is getting, that's fine. I know they're talented. I know Luke Fickell's a great coach, but that's a drastic system change that they're making in year one. I just don't know if it's going to reach the full potential that it can reach. Iowa's always going to be tough. Don't get me wrong. Uh, Minnesota. I mean, Brett has never lost to Minnesota. Like my notes is literally Brett never loses to Minnesota, so I'm not thinking about that right now. But yeah, I just don't understand. Like for me, if I was the odds maker, maybe I'd put Iowa as a slight favorite. But these 6 wins projections for me, it's bonkers.
Is that what the over under line is? Is it 6.5?
It's 6.5. Yeah, yeah.
The over seems easy
I,
there.
yeah.
I mean, you look at this Big Ten West and what Illinois is returning. They have the closest identity to last year, a team that won 8-4. Yes, they lose Chase Brown and Devin Witherspoon, but I feel like in the Big Ten West, losing backfield depth in your defense and secondary isn't as big of a deal as if it was in the Big Ten East when you're dealing with Tonga Viola, the Ohio State wide receivers, Michigan, their offense, Penn State's offense. It's ground and pound for the most case in the Big Ten West outside of this new air raid Wisconsin offense that we have not even seen yet. So I think with just with what Illinois is returning, the offensive line is probably fourth best in the Big Ten right now. So I just can't view this team as anything less than 8 wins, even. I mean, it's just mind blowing to me that people are underrating this team because they quote unquote haven't done it yet. But their head coach Brett Bielema has had that level of consistency in the Big Ten West or the Big Ten leaders or whatever it was earlier on when Brett Bielema was the coach of Wisconsin. So it's just kind of crazy to me that they're not getting the benefit of the doubt where Iowa is when their offense was just absolutely atrocious last year.
Yeah, to me, I feel like it's just Iowa has done it more consistently historically than Illinois has, and that's really the only thing. Like Illinois is returning like the same amount of talent that Iowa is, I would say, and there's like you just mentioned, running the same systems they had last year, where Iowa is going to be doing the same things as well. But yeah, the offense was clearly another step ahead of what Iowa was here, Illinois, and maybe you got a new quarterback in there, you got a new running back in there. But end of the day, you've got a lot of returners on the offensive line. You've got your top receiver back. You got a good tight end, Tip Reeman. It's I mean, I don't understand the hate.
Yeah, I mean, this is Brett said himself, this is the most confident he's been in our QB room. Our running back room is loaded with young guys. We got 4-star talent there. Our receivers, now when you look at them compared to what that room looked like when Brett took over, it's tenfold better. Defensive line, I've been saying it for forever now. Before now, it's becoming popular that Newton's going to be the top defensive tackle drafted, and his partner Keith Randolph is right there with him. He just had Newton's kind of taking all the publicity, and he's the popular guy right now. So we're building depth. We don't have it on the back end yet, but that's what kind of separates the Illinois's from the Ohio States and whatnot. But if we can stay relatively injury free, I love this team, the talent that we've been stacking up, and I have us winning the West. Austin, I think you have us winning the West. Brant, sounds like you have Iowa winning the West.
I do have Iowa winning the West. I have Illinois at 7-5, but as I mentioned, almost every game on that schedule is a coin flip to me. I could see anywhere from 6-6 to all the way up to 11-1. Like genuinely, it just depends kind of how the cards fall in the West with injuries and stuff like that. But ultimately, I had a loss to Penn State in Week 3, but I think that is going to be a wildly competitive game.
I can't
Um,
wait for that game.
it's going to be Drew Aller's first big test, and you guys are one of the toughest defenses that he's going to play all year long. So I think that's one that Illinois could easily sneak away with. I had
Are we going
Maryland.
to have 10 overtimes?
Oh yeah, we'll see if you guys can get it all the way up to 9 overtimes this time. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one for sure. I had Maryland as a loss, but that one's genuinely a coin flip. Maryland, they usually start out hot and then kind of fizzle out.
And they have our number. They always, I mean,
Yeah, they're a tough team. They're talented, and just with it being in College Park, like it just is an added layer. But I mean, you could easily squeak that one out too. I had Wisconsin as a loss. That one is, I mean, you guys are returning Brett Bielema, and they're just the coaching turnover. Like it's hard to win in college football with a first year head coach. So that one really could go either way as well. I would not be surprised at all to see Brett beat up on his old Badgers there. Um, I had Minnesota as a loss, but you mentioned how Brett's never lost to
go
the
ahead and
good.
change that right now.
So
Take that off the record.
maybe I should change my prediction to 8-4.
Yeah.
Just with that one, yeah. Actually, now that I give it more thought, because I just did this pretty quickly, it is on the road, but I mean, Minnesota is a team dealing with a lot of turnover too, with basically all their offensive production. You guys, what you return, especially on defense, especially that front seven, is probably going to be enough to overpower them. And it just historically, I mean, it makes sense. And then I had Iowa as a loss. I think I'm going to hang my hat on that one, just because their defense is insane. Not to say your defense isn't, but Kinnick is just a super, super tough place to play as well. So I think I'll roll 8-4 for my prediction.
I'll accept 8-4. Some of these 6 wins,
absolutely.
7 wins, no, I'm not going to agree with. But 8-4, fine, Brent. We're friends again.
There we go.
What is a team in the Big Ten that a lot of people aren't talking enough about, in your opinion, Brant?
I mean, I kind of just mentioned it there, but I think Maryland. You've got the Big Ten East. It's your top 3 teams. It's Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, and everyone knows it. But Maryland is sneakily right there as a 4th team. And the big thing with that is just the returning quarterback, Talia Tagovailoa. I think they're one of only 2-3 teams that are returning their quarterback in the Big Ten this year. JJ McCarthy, obviously, and then Gavin Wimsatt at Rutgers, along with Tagovailoa, are your only returning quarterbacks. So that adds more than you would think. Do I think they're going to compete with the Big 3 in the East? Probably not, but I still think they can give them all games.
So you've also seen the national stage since you are an Ohio State fan. How do you think this Big Ten stacks up against other conferences, especially at the top where you're dealing with like Georgia versus Michigan, Georgia versus Ohio State, and the rest of the Power Five as we know it for this final year?
Yeah, for this year, I think we stack up with the best of them, genuinely. Top to bottom, I think it's a very, very talented conference. And you couldn't have said this in like past years where, Ohio State just kind of dominated the whole thing. And SEC is like, who does Ohio State play? Nobody. But I mean, you look at the West, you've got 5 really, really, really competitive teams in there. And then you've got Nebraska, who is just a big question mark, could be competitive as early as this year. And then you have Northwestern, that's like the bottom feeders. And then looking at the East, you obviously have the top 3 teams, which I think are 3 of probably the top 5 best teams in all of college football this year. Maryland, which is going to keep things competitive. And then the bottom of 3 are, I mean, they're not bad football teams. Rutgers, Michigan State, Indiana maybe is a bad football team. But Rutgers and Michigan State are like, fringe bowl teams. They can maybe get to that 6-win mark and get to a bowl game. I think the top and the middle is stronger than the SEC personally.
I like it, and I like the fact that the new coaches that we're bringing in, between Fickle and Rule, are college proven, and I think bringing that type of talent on the coaching ranks is just going to make the product on the field better. And I'm looking forward to the future battles, between the two conferences. And I think it's just with all the money our conference has coming in, I think we could, surprise a few people.
Yeah, I fully agree. And then bringing in Lincoln Riley, Chip Kelly,
Right.
all these guys from I mean, the coaching is just going to be next level starting. I mean, this year with like Luke Fickle and Matt Rule and all those guys coming in. But I mean, the coaching in our conference is going to be insane at a level like it may have never been before in the past.
Now, as an Ohio State guy, what are your thoughts on adding USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington to the Big Ten next year?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this whole conference realignment thing, but I get it's like it's run by all the TV networks and their money. Uh, I mean, at the end of the day, money wins everything. So that's just with the way that college athletics are trending. We kind of had to do it. I, I'm not a fan of dismantling the League of Champions, Conference of Champions, whatever they call themselves over in the Pac-12. And now like the Pacific Coast doesn't even have their own specific conference, and just the whole like dismantling the whole regionality of it all. That's what made college athletics special, and just like the historic rivalries. Like who knows if we're gonna play Michigan the Friday or Saturday after Thanksgiving again going forward for the rest of the time. Like that could easily just be taken away. And I know there with the Pac-12 all dismantling, you're losing like the Civil War rivalry. You're losing the Apple Cup. So that really sucks to see all that go.
Yeah, it's let's say Brant was in charge of sports from here on out. Do you keep the game on the same date? It seems
Oh,
like both one coach wants to keep it, one is open to changing it.
yeah, no, I undoubtedly keep it. I mean, it's tradition.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. It's got to be like that.
So, final one for you, Brant. Who is your Big Ten champion?
Yeah, I can't come on any podcast and not say Ohio State. Um, but genuinely, I think Penn State has the door open as much as it's ever been. And not to say that Ohio State and Michigan aren't talented, because they're two of my top five teams in college football. But I think Penn State is very, very talented this year. The most talented Penn State team we've seen in James Franklin's entire tenure. Are they going to be able to steal one from Ohio State in the shoe? Are they going to be able to even beat Michigan? I know they have them at home, but Michigan had their number the past few years too. Remains to be seen. So that's kind of my sleeper pick. But my homer pick is Ohio State.
As well, speaking of Ohio State, since you are a Big Ten guy, your Big Ten season starts this week. Along with there's another Big Ten game, Nebraska and Minnesota. Any thoughts on those two games?
Yes, we can start with Nebraska, Minnesota. Going to take a second to selflessly plug in our Sky U pod and our Sully Scoop pod, our Nebraska and Minnesota podcast. They're going to be bringing you the first ever Big Banter preview show. And we're going to have this for, as you guys know, but just to speak to your listeners here, before each Big Ten game, Illini Cast and all of our other Big Ten podcasts are going to be getting with the Big Ten team that they're playing that week, that specific podcast, and just kind of chop it up, preview the game. So you'll get to hear from experts from all the other teams. First one of that is going down. It'll be posted, I believe, by Wednesday between Sky U and Sully Scoop. So super exciting stuff to watch out for there. Really excited for the Big Ten season to get started with that. I really don't know what to expect in that game, to be honest. Both teams seem to have a lot of question marks, with Callie McManus making his first season. I mean, he started a few games last year, but first full season starting for Minnesota. And then Nebraska, just a complete overhaul that Matt Rule did there. Going to be a fun one to get the season started. And then for the Ohio State game, I'm actually going out to Bloomington for that game. So super excited for that. Going to meet up with the guys from the LEO podcast, our Indiana podcast out there, hit their tailgate. So it should be a lot of fun. The line on that game's 30 right now, which, I mean, Ohio State should win by that much. But, I mean, I'm not too worried about it being on the road. I think there will be more Ohio State fans at the game than Indiana fans. That's usually how it is when we go there.
They
It's
did
like
play you pretty close last time you guys played, didn't they? Wasn't it like close at halftime, or am I thinking of a different game?
they've played us close a lot in the past. The past few years, they just haven't been great, and we've dominated them pretty badly. They played
Uh-huh.
us the last time they played us closely was when they had Mike Penix in the COVID year, and
Yeah,
they actually had
yeah.
like a really good team.
I think that's what I was referencing. Yeah.
We were blowing them out, and they came back and like cut it to touchdown. I think we ended up winning by 2 scores, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, 30-point line is a lot for the first game of the year with a new quarterback, and most importantly, 2 new tackles on the offensive line. That's, I mean, it's not easy to revamp your offensive line, and I haven't heard of anybody specifically stepping up into those spots. So, going to be interesting to see if they're rotating guys in, how the line's meshing, and also going to be interesting to see what they're doing at quarterback. So I'm not fully confident to pound the minus 30 spread, but I mean it should be a win. It better be a win, or else give it to that.
Okay, Austin, you got anything
I,
else?
Yeah, whenever you go to Bloomington, head on over to Nick's English Hut. It is an amazing dinner. It is just fantastic. Head there. They have some great beers as well. So give it a shot. Give it a shot when you're at IU's campus.
Awesome. I'll be sure to visit it. Thanks for the recommendation because I genuinely didn't know what I was doing over there, but I'll take you up on that.
Not a problem. Get the Stromboli. It's excellent.
You can't go wrong with a good Stromboli.
Thank you, Brant, and I can't wait to hear from you again this season. It's going to be an absolute blast as we go through this Big Banter Podcast Network free for all whenever these teams play each other later on in conference play.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll catch you in Indy maybe.
That's
Oh,
the
we'll
plan.
see you in Indy.
We'll meet up before game for that one
Guarantee.
too. How about that?
Oh yeah, no, definitely will.
All right, thank you,
Thank you,
Brant.
Brant.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
And that was the Illini Cast, part of the Big Banter Podcast Network. Sonny, what a show. I can't believe it's game week.
We've been waiting, Austin. You know, all the stretching is done, all the warm ups are over. You know, fall training camps, spring training camps, all that. The preview articles have all been written. Now it's time to play ball.
Yeah, they could rip up those preview mags because it's now time to prove it out on the field and see what each of these team has. And I think Illinois has that winner, and I can't wait until Saturday to see it going.
Yeah, I mean Toledo's gonna be tough. I'm not as confident as a lot of Twitter seems to be. I'm seeing a lot of 3 touchdown predictions, but I think they're also the perfect team to start the season off against because they've got. I mean, I was looking at our schedule. Like Finn might be the third or fourth best quarterback we faced this year, and
Yeah,
to have him as the kickoff game, like to test out our young secondary, I'm actually kind of looking forward to seeing how our secondary responds to that, how they play to that, how they can adjust. I mean, we have more talent than Toledo, as we should, being a Big Ten team over a MAC team, and obviously we have a massive advantage on both lines. So I think we should win this game, but I don't. My personal prediction is I don't think we cover. I think the 9.5 spread. I think we're gonna kind of play
yeah.
things. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't really anticipate a blowout. Like maybe it's a 12-point game. If there's a field goal kicked at the very end to push that above 9, but I think it's going to be a kind of what is this Illinois team kind of thing. But I have full confidence that we'll win just because of the coaching advantage that we do have over Toledo.
Yeah. In my little scouting report, it seems like their coach is able to assemble a lot of talent, but when it comes down to it, a lot of people aren't really confident in his coaching abilities, and that's something we've become all too comfortable with here, being Illinois football fans for as long as we have. So it's nice that we're not in that boat anymore.
Exactly. I mean, we've seen it so many times with Nebraska having terrible coaches and Illinois being able to take advantage of that. And I think now that we have Brett, there's not gonna be a lot of games where we're like, "Oh, this might be a coaching mismatch for Brett." He just is cool, calm, and collected at all times, and it's crazy to think that this is who he is after his first stretch of being that egotistical guy at Wisconsin, and then the shell of himself in Arkansas, and now it's kind of the best of both worlds. He's humble yet confident, and that's the perfect blend that you have in a coach.
Yeah, I mean, I know he's got the game plan ready. Like, I know Illinois is not going to show up on Saturday unprepared. Like, we may lose. I don't foresee it happening, but I don't think it's going to, if this was the previous regime, I'd almost be counting on us losing and just praying it wasn't going to be a blowout on the wrong side. But, Brett,
Absolutely.
I know he's going to have a good, solid game plan. Another reason I don't think we are going to probably cover the 9.5 is games 2 and 3 are going to be super important for us as well. So I don't think we're going to be opening up that playbook all that much against Toledo, because Kansas is kind of like an upgraded Toledo. That
Mhm.
the Kansas game might decide whether we hit the over or under the 6.5 wins that a lot of people project Illinois to have. And that's going, they've got a very potent, fast offense that, again, I referenced earlier, our defensive backs are going to have to heed the challenge from Toledo in order to be ready for the onslaught that they're going to be receiving in week 2. So hopefully, our coaches can take a look at the film, not give Kansas too much film to scout game 1. And yeah, I think Toledo's going to be a closer match than a lot of other people think.
Absolutely. But Sonny, I want to thank you again for joining us. It's been a great Illinicast podcast, hasn't it?
It's it's a super fun project. I'm glad Big Banter's reached out to us, and we got this running off the ground. It's Illini Nation is pretty rowdy and pretty vocal on social media, so it's nice giving an outlet for some folks to get the content that they're craving. And we've had some very solid numbers so far, so I'm glad that we're kind of giving the people what they want, and looking forward to continuing to do that.
Yeah, we're gonna up our podcast outage for 2 podcasts a week, just so we can preview and review the games moving forward instead of all piling it into 1 episode per week. So be on the lookout for 2 podcasts a week from the Illini Cast as we move forward throughout the season, and hopefully we're talking about a lot of wins. Hopefully we're popping a lot of champagne bottles. Pardon the pun. But again, this is going to be a great situation for Illini fans to have us talk about the games and review the games as well.
Yeah, it's nice not to be worried about 2-10, and actually again feel as strongly as both you and I do that we have a team that can contend, and it'll actually hopefully be a joy watching our football team take on the field every Saturday, as opposed to dreading the kickoff.
Absolutely. Sonny, hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again this week.
All right, Austin, let's go Illinois. I'm going to call it 17-10. What about you?
I will go with 35-27.
Oh, wow. High
I think
scoring
it's
game.
gonna I think it's gonna be a high scoring game with Toledo's quarterback play and just the athleticism that Illinois has on the edges with Isaiah Williams and Casey Washington.
Wow. All right. Well, your game would be more fun to watch than my prediction. So hopefully you're right. As long as we come out with the W, right?
Yes, just avoid the action. Avoid the action at all costs.
Yeah, you're exactly right. All right, Austin.
All right, thank you, Sonny.